Hello, I'm Lizelle Sambry and welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things writing, traditional publishing, and a little bit of reading. And today is the release date of Tender Beasts. This is my fourth YA novel. It's a psychological thriller slash horror that is great for fans of complicated families, slasher vibes, and private school settings. In it, we follow Sunny, who is the youngest daughter of the wealthy Bear family, whose private school becomes the setting for a series of grisly murders shortly after her mother dies. When her brother, who has recently been let out on bail for the murder of his girlfriend, is implicated in these new deaths, they have to work together to clear his name, find the real murderer, and save their family legacy. So that is all about Tender Beasts. I'm very excited to have it out. And this video is very similar to the Delicious Monsters video I did last year. You all seem to like it, so I figured I'd do another one of these. I'm just going to talk about kind of the journey of this book, a little bit about the editorial process, how it was written. I'm going to talk about the highs and lows I've experienced for the book thus far, and really my hopes for the future, because even though I am finished this book, like I've done everything that I can do with this book, it's really just starting its journey as a published book. And so, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about my hopes for it and share some final thoughts with you. There are timestamps so you can jump around as you feel like it and do that as you wish. I've also linked down below, I have a playlist, which if you want to watch like the full journey, I have a playlist of me of all the writing vlogs where I've worked on this book, so you can see me working on it from start to finish. And so that's like multiple hours of footage if you want to watch all those writing vlogs. And what I will also say about Tender Beasts is that if you want to buy a copy this week or request that your library stock it, which is something that you can do for free, I am running a pre-order / library request campaign. I will put the link in the description to all of the details, but you can get some really cool swag items, not only for Tender Beasts, but also for Delicious Monsters, which is really me like wanting to give some Delicious Monsters stuff out to the people that supported that book who are interested in Tender Beasts. So you have until March 2nd to do this. March 2nd, I believe at like midnight, you have that amount of time. So you can go in store and you can pick up your copy of the book today or at any point this week and submit your information in that pre-order form, and you can get all that swag. Or you can request that your library stock it, which again is something that you can do totally for free, and you can get all of the swag. You will also be entered into a draw to win a really cool prize pack, which like features like a Bear Academy sweater, which is the school in the book, like a book tote, a pennant flag, lots of cool stuff. So please check out the link in the description for all of those details. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the writing and editorial process. So the initial story spark for this book began with just kind of me really pondering about the Haunting of Hill House Netflix adaptation once again. But I really loved that idea of a group of like estranged siblings coming back together with all of their like, you know, their baggage and all of their history, and like being forced to be in proximity again together. And so the idea that I had was basically the exact same setup. It was going to be 5 siblings, and they were going to come back together for, you know, after the death of their mother, and they were going to be forced to have to stick it out with each other for some reason. But kind of the 2 extra things were that they, you know, really the 1 extra thing, sorry, is that, their brother, their youngest brother, had recently been let out on bail after being charged with the murder of his girlfriend. And so that added this kind of like, this like very kind of like horror-esque element in that they weren't fully believing of him because of their history together. And it was like gonna be this weird thing of like, how do they feel about him and like how do they all get along together, that sort of thing. But I didn't really have any like concrete ideas for anything else at all. which is when that brings me to the proposal process for Tender Beasts. So essentially, and it blows my mind to think about this, but I wrote the original proposal for this book way back in December 2020. So this was shortly after we sold Delicious Monsters, and like I hadn't even finished Blood Like Fate yet. So like, just to give you an idea, like I hadn't even finished writing my second book and I was starting the proposal for my fourth book, for my fourth YA rather, actually my fifth book. So that is what was happening. And so essentially it was just, we sold Delicious Monsters in a 2-book deal. And so then I would have needed another standalone YA book that kind of fit the similar vibes. And I thought, hey, what about that story spark that I'd had for that original idea, which was going to be an adult novel? Could I adapt that into a YA novel? And I realized that I could. It's just I had to change a lot of the considerations. So for example, like considering how things would be different for a youth offender, how that would affect a young person, and how that would be different for their interactions as siblings, because they'd probably still be living in the same home. And then I ended up making them wealthy so that it could make sense that the brother might get out on bail, because when you have a very serious charge, like, is not really, to my understanding, easy to be let out on bail. And so it was really like, okay, if they have wealth and status and power, that would be different. And so that got added on, and then I added them owning that private school, and I made it needs-based because I really liked the idea of that. So it is a school that's needs-based, for, so it is for, you know, less privileged children to attend and get a private school experience, a private school education, the way that like wealthy privileged children might, except the children from the family, they also attend this school. So there's a very different dynamic. And I like that because to me, it felt like a different sort of play on that private school setting. So instead of just having like, you know, private school filled with rich kids and like, you know, that sort of thing, it's like this wealthy family that is actually in a school filled with kids that like really are not rich in any way, and like how those interactions come together. I thought that would be really interesting to talk about, and just like a different way to do the private school thing. And so all of those things came together and I put that proposal together, and then I actually didn't get to work on it again all the way until like July of 2021. So I started the proposal in December, and then I got busy with things and I just like didn't get to work on it for like 6 months, and then I finished off the proposal. So I basically did kind of like a self-edit of it. I sent it to my agent, she sent me back notes, and we basically sent it to my editor in that same week. And then came the proposal feedback. So in case you don't know, in traditional publishing, like, you do need your next book to be approved, even if it's under the same contract. So that's why I had to write another proposal for Tender Beasts in the first place. So in the case of the Blood Like Magic deal, it was for a duology, so we knew there would be 2 books. I wrote the first book. The second book was obviously going to be a sequel, so I didn't have to do any proposal thing. I just like went and wrote the sequel. But in the case of the Delicious Monsters 2-book deal, because they were standalones, I did need to show them a proposal in order for them to kind of give me the thumbs up to write that particular standalone. And so that's why I ended up writing a proposal. Usually, you know, you write a proposal to like sell a book, but in this case, because it was a standalone, I did have to do another one just to be able to show my publisher what this book was going to be and get approval for that to go forward. So that's why we ended up sending that proposal. And then I ended up having a meeting with my editor about it, because they did have some concerns initially. So they weren't sure that this was like the right follow-up for Delicious Monsters. I mean, in some ways there are similarities, but in some ways there are a lot of differences. Like, find that Delicious Monsters and Tender Beasts have different vibes, even though they are both psychological thrillers and horrors. I find Tender Beasts is like a bit more fast paced, it like edges a bit more thriller, that sort of thing. But anyway, they weren't sure if this was kind of the right follow-up, and there were some things that they wanted to see changed. My editor, for example, like they found the ending of the book to be very bleak, which it was originally, and they wanted that to be changed. And so that's one of those points where like you have to decide as an author whether you like are cool with changing something, or whether you want to like put your foot down and be like, no, there's a very good reason for why this is happening. And in my case, I did actually think it was better to change the ending. I did kind of like, I think the bleak ending to me felt more horror, and it felt more like what a horror movie ending might be. But for the way that things come together and the way that it happens, it made more sense to switch it up. And to me, I was happy because it wasn't like it's not a perfect sunshine rainbows sort of thing, but it is also not as bleak as it originally was. So that was something that changed. And I also kind of felt like there was not a clear understanding of what I was doing in the book, that was making the team feel sort of like hesitant about thumbs upping the book. So what I did is I kind of like went back to the drawing board. I wrote out what this like new ending could be, and I essentially like reframed the theme of the book. And then I had a second chat with my editor, and I was approved to go forward with it. And so this kind of like, this for me is when I decided that I didn't like doing proposals and that I didn't like selling or getting approvals on proposals, which is funny because then I went on to sell A Mastery of Monsters on proposal. But I just really felt like the team really couldn't get a good sense of what I was doing and what the story was about based on the proposal. And so when the book, spoiler alert, when the book was written, they read it and they loved it. And really, besides the ending, nothing functionally changed about the book. It was the same themes I was always doing. I just ended up reframing them and like discussing it with my editor in that way. And so it was the same thing I was always doing. I just had to like reframe the discussion. And that's why I feel like I don't really think that my work is always understood in a proposal form. I feel like I don't know. I feel like it's just not my skill set. Maybe I'm just not good at like expressing my theme in a way that can be understood when I do a proposal. But that was one of those situations where I really like, it was really kind of difficult to be in that proposal situation because I was like, if you just read it, you'd get it. But it was really hard for me to like explain and express my vision for the story in that format. And so that was a bit of a not like a super rough time because it like worked out and it was fine, but it was like a tough moment for me because it was hard to kind of figure out how to express what I plan to do with a story that wasn't written yet. And so that was the proposal experience. Now on to the first draft. So I started working on the first draft of the book in April 2021. I believe it took me 2 months, which is how long it usually takes me to draft something. But I started in April, even though my deadline wasn't until October of that year, just because I like to start early if I can. It just gives me way more time to work on the book. I don't feel so pressed against the deadline of like trying to get it ready, and it gives me more time to send a more polished version to my editor. So I did my first draft, I did a self-edit, and then I sent it to beta readers, and that is when I got into like, I guess, the sort of editing process, which I started when I did my self-edit because that was part of the editing process. But then I sent it to beta readers and I got feedback from them. And the main feedback I got was that they were having trouble connecting to the main character. Sunny is a very special main character. I mean, all of my main characters are special, but she's very different from a main characters I've written in the past, because how she externally presents herself to characters is very different from her internal dialogue. And so how she interacts with characters, how she expresses herself to characters, all of that gives a very different vibe from like how she actually is in her actual personality. And so that created, I think, an unintentional amount of distance when I first wrote it. And so that was the like disconnect from main character sort of thing. And then also the readers felt that the beginning was too slow. So that was something I like worked on throughout the process, because my editor also had like a little bit of that trouble with the main character in the beginning. And so I really worked on that, of like wanting to get that duality of like how she is internally, how she expresses herself externally, but also when I have that internal dialogue, wanting to make it so that it is still relatable to the reader, and that the reader can still kind of form a connection with the character, even knowing that she is not really being her most authentic self, which is very obvious right from when you start the book. So not a spoiler, super obvious. And so I worked on that, and then my editor did also, even after I did edits with my beta readers, think that the beginning was a little bit slow. And so I really worked really hard on that beginning bit, because it's important. Like that's where people are going to start the story, and you want to make sure you're gripping readers at that point to carry them through. But I think it was really like a mismatch of pacing, because after that, like I want to say like the first third, like things really pick up speed in the book, and it's like a lot of things are happening, and I feel like that's what made the beginning feel so slow, because the rest of the pace of the book was so much faster. And so I really worked on inserting a lot of things, like rewriting chapters, really restructuring that whole beginning part in order to have the pacing feel more equalized throughout the book. And then something else that I had to work on was the journal entries, which I've talked about in many vlogs. So way back when I had that original proposal feedback meeting with my editor, she had talked about like, could we add in a second point of view the way that we have a second point of view in Delicious Monsters. And so I ended up adding these journal entries which come from Sunny's mother. So Sunny's mother has recently passed in the beginning of the novel, but then you get her journal entries from her as a teenager, which kind of like gives that perspective of like the building of the Bear family legacy. Because when you meet them from Sunny's perspective, they are a very wealthy family, they have a very good reputation, they're very well known, and that's kind of how they are. But when her mother was a teenager, she didn't have any of that. She lived on a farm in Oro-Medonte, if you are familiar with places in southern Ontario, and like came from that very humble beginning and then built this family over time. So you kind of get to see that perspective, and also some of the like, you know, the mystery aspects while bouncing back and forth between those. And so I really worked on those because I wanted them to be engaging. I think that's the thing about when you do a dual POV book. I don't want people to go to one other POV and then be like, oh, I hate this, I can't wait, like speeding through it to get back to the main POV. I don't really want that to happen. I want people to enjoy that POV at least as much as they are enjoying the other one, or like, you know, I don't want it to be any sort of like chore or anything like that. And I also don't want it to feel like it's just a device to share things with you, because that's kind of part of it, but I don't want it to feel like that's the only function, like you're not getting anything character-wise or development-wise from it. And so I really worked on fixing that and like making that the best it could be as well. And so that was really cool. And I have like little annotations in the book, which I was inspired by the Paul Bears Club by Paul Tremblay, where if you aren't familiar with the narration, it's like these journal like book entries by the main character and then another character annotating them, and I thought that idea was really cool of having annotations, especially when you are like in a journal entry format. Like you can cross things out and like you can pull pages out. And then you also have Sunny's mom from like an older POV when she's older, annotating and like adding footnotes to her teenage diary entries, which I really liked. So yeah, editing, it all came together, and I'm very, very happy with what I ended up at the end of the book. I'm very proud of this book, and I'm really proud of all the work I put in to make sure it was the best it could be. Now we're gonna get into the highs and the lows of the experience of publishing Tender Beasts thus far, and I'm going to start with the lows so we can finish on the highs. And so the lows is I really do feel like for Tender Beasts, it's that second book in a contract sort of syndrome. So what some people have previously called second book syndrome, which to me makes sense for a series. So you put out the first book in the series, and the next book in the series doesn't get as much attention, doesn't get as much push, doesn't get as many readers, because people have to read the first book in order to get to the second book. So that makes total sense to me. But very strangely, the same thing happens in the case of people writing two standalones. For whatever reason, I personally don't get it. But the second book in a standalone contract will, from what I've just like seen around from other authors, will not get as much attention as that first book in the contract, which I find kind of, I don't know, kind of weird and strange and silly for standalones, because I was like, it's a completely separate book. Like you think it would have really an equal amount of like push and attention as the other one because it's just its own book. But from what I have seen like time and time again, that is not really necessarily the case unless the first book in the contract did really, really well. But that's a case of series too. If the first book in the contract did really, really well, like you could still get a lot of pickup on the next one. So yeah, it was just that sort of thing where I definitely felt like there was, you know, I was seeing the book less, I was seeing less kind of general attention for it, that sort of thing. And so that was, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's kind of tough because you're like, for me, I'm like, why can't all my books be seen equally? But apparently not. So that was a little bit, of a tough part of the process. And then the next one is this was my first time getting sort of strangely mixed trade reviews. So trade reviews, trades are like, I don't even really know how to describe trades, but it's like people like Kirkus and Booklist and School Library Journal, and they review your books. You might not always get reviews from them. It's actually great to get a review from them, period. And if you get starred reviews from them, then it's like an endorsement. And so this is really good, as I have heard, for things like libraries. Like if you have starred reviews, it's like good for libraries as like being like, okay, like those are the books that we should pick up and we should grab. And so previously when I've gotten trade reviews, they have basically always been positive. And sometimes I get starred reviews and that's amazing. And sometimes I don't, but they've across the board all been positive reviews. And this was the first time that I had gotten reviews where like there'd be like one sentence and I'd be like, huh, that kind of seems like maybe you didn't like it that much. And that was strange for me. Yeah, so that was just a little bit weird. I was kind of like, oh, okay. But again, it's positive to get reviewed by the trades at all. So I was like, okay. And also I know a lot of authors who've gotten not even like what I got was like positive trade reviews and like every once in a while like a sentence that was like, like doesn't seem as positive. But I know people who have gotten like very like just negative, like, it's a negative review, they did not like it. And I've seen these for books that I have absolutely loved, that I think are so good that I'm like, okay, well, we very much have different opinions, because at the end of the day, that's the thing, is that it is an opinion. But yeah, so I've seen all those things across the board. So it's really, in the grand scheme of things, very much not a big deal. Also, I will talk about this in the positives, but you know, there are some positive other things where I'm like, I'm not worried about library things. But yeah, it was just like, it was different. I was like, huh. But yeah, that was really it for the lows. Now for the highs, which I personally prefer talking about. So a big high was the cover. I'm very, very pleased with the cover of Tender Beasts. I think it is so good. I think it is so cool. I will have the artist linked down below so you can check them out, and also the designer. Yeah, I absolutely love the cover. I think it is so cool. I think it is just the right amount of creepy. Like, I absolutely love it. I also love because like the Bear family, they own this private school. They also own a farm, which is the farm where the main character's mother grew up. So they also own a farm. And so I like the kind of like the way they're placed. Like, you know, that like old timey like farm painting of like the husband and the wife and they're like holding their stuff. It like reminds me of that. Obviously they're brother and sister, they're not husband and wife, but it like gives me that feel, and like the farm themed wallpaper. I love it. I love everything about that cover. So that was, yeah, big win for me. And I was very involved in that cover process, which was really cool. I think I've talked about this in previous videos. I don't know that my opinions were helpful, but I really liked being part of the process and like seeing all the behind the scenes stuff. So that was really cool. That was great. So big win. And the interiors, they did this really cool chapter header of like a claw scraping through, and like on the like main page too, the title page rather. That was really cool. And like the formatting inside. This is my first book where I've gotten like formatted text messages, which I'm so excited about. I've always been so jealous of books where they like image format the text messages so they look like real text messages with like emojis and stuff. I love that. I was so excited about that. And so yeah, just like really cool like formatting things. I'm very happy with the interior design as well. Tender Beasts was also a Junior Library Guild selection, which I'm very excited about. That means it'll get sent out to a bunch of different librarians. It's a fantastic honor. I'm really, really excited about that and look forward to seeing those books get sent out. And then I was also invited to Teen Book Con in Texas, which I'm also very excited about. I always love when something is like specifically targeted towards teens, because then I get to, you know, meet the people who I'm writing the books for, who I might not otherwise have an opportunity to. And so very, very excited, very much looking forward to that and to going to do that in March. So yeah, those were the highs so far, with hopefully many more to come. But very excited about all of those things that have happened so far. And I feel like those really, like, to me, overwhelm. They overwhelm these sort of low bits. How am I feeling now? So I'm filming this in early February because I like to get these videos done ahead of time, but I'm filming it in early February and I am feeling really good. Like, I feel really like chill, and I feel like part of that is due to my decision not to have a like launch day party, release party sort of thing. So originally my plan was I was gonna go to Toronto and I was going to do a whole launch thing. And then I just started feeling like anxious about it. And like I didn't really want to do that, but I felt like I should, because like that's what you do. Like when your book goes out and you have a whole launch thing and you do a bunch of stuff. And I just didn't really feel like it. I kind of just wanted to stay home and like do like a private dinner celebration and just have like a chill, calm day. And I ended up just deciding to do that, especially because I knew that I had events coming up. One thing is not announced yet, but I will be in Toronto in March. So it's not like I will be skipping out in Toronto. I will be in Toronto in March for an event that will be announced down the line. And then afterwards, in the same month, in March, I am going to Teen Book Con. And then in the same month, in March, I'm also going to New Orleans for a writing retreat. And so that was also, I think, the source of the stress, is that I was like, I'm going to travel at the end of February and then travel again 3 separate times in the next month. And for me, like, travel is like, I really like traveling, but it's a lot. It's a lot. It takes a lot out of me. It is a lot anxiety wise. And I couldn't conceive of like the point of traveling then and then also doing all this travel later while I am also doing my first pre-order campaign and I have to get all those things done. It was just like, it felt very stressful to me. And once I was like, you know what, I'm actually not going to do anything, I felt so good. I felt so much more calm. And also I have this video here. So I have this video coming out on my release day, which to me is in some ways its own sort of launch. And I just wanted to be able to like, you know, do my own thing and like interact with people on social media in sort of a comment based way and just launch the book that way. And so I feel like that's why I feel really chill, because I'm like, like February is just like its own thing and I can feel all of the calm before the storm of March when I have a bunch of things going on. So I'm feeling really good. I've also been really appreciating people who have been tagging me to say that they are excited for the book to come out. People who have been tagging me and like saying that, you know, they've done an early read of the book and they really enjoyed it and they really loved it. I feel like I've had so much more of a feeling of like getting to enjoy that without any expectation. Coming into this year, one of my big things is I really wanted to see my book as a success right off the bat, just from me finishing it and being proud of my book and being happy in that way, instead of like putting on myself the pressure of like commercial success. And I do feel like I feel the freedom in my body from that. So even though like one of the lows I talked about was like not really seeing it as much, like that's like, I feel like it takes up so like a small part of my brain and my effort, whereas I feel like last year that was so much more of like what I thought about. And like, even though it's part of my little low section, I'm not thinking about those things really on a regular basis. I really am more, I feel like, consumed with being really thankful for all the people that are excited for the book and like are sharing that excitement for the book, are looking forward to it. And I feel like I am being more filled up with that. I feel like I have more room to appreciate the positive things that I see for my book, because I'm not bogged down by anxiety about commercial success, if that helps. I'm trying to like make sure I express this properly. And so that's really it. So I've been really excited about seeing those things. Like, so if anyone has posted any of that, thank you so much. And people that have signed on for the pre-order campaign, that's also been really wonderful. I'm excited to see people excited about the book, and I look forward to sending you all the swag items. As I'm filming this, I've like just ordered them. So I wanted to wait a little bit to make sure I was clear on numbers, so that I wouldn't be getting too little, but wouldn't be getting way too much. So yeah, I'm really excited and looking forward to that. And so yeah, I just feel really good about the book. I'm really happy with it. I'm really proud of it. I cannot wait to get my final copies. I'm so excited to get those final copies. And I'm really like curious to listen to the audiobook. I would say that's my only like sort of nervous point. Because I wasn't asked for any kind of pronunciation. So I was like, oh, okay, everything's just good. So it's just like been produced. And I'm curious about how the journal entry stuff was done, because there's footnotes and there's like crossed out things. And I just haven't heard it. So I don't know what's happening. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But that's my only like little bit of nerves, just because I haven't heard it. So I'm like, what happened? Or like, how is that done? So looking forward to that, because as this video releases on launch day, I will be spending a bunch of my day sitting down and listening to it. But I really feel like good, because I feel like I've come at this launch and of this book with the right energy, which is really something that I talked about when I talked about, I'll link it down below in my end of the year wrap up video for 2023. I really wanted to come into the launch of this book in the energy of like celebration of my book and pride about my book, no matter what, and not getting caught up in numbers things and that sort of like rat race thing. I have no plans to be looking at my sales data. I will not be doing that. I have no plans to be looking at my Goodreads data. I will not be doing that. I will not be looking at reviews. I have no plans to be looking at any of that stuff. I'm really going to separate myself. In the past, I always like try not really to look at reviews, but the secret of being an author is that most people at some point will have a feel at the time where they are curious or insecure, which is in my case, and they want to check on their reviews and they sneak a little peek and you see what people are saying about it. So I will not pretend that I have never done that, but I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I haven't. I've been very good about that. And I'm very proud of myself. And I feel like that also contributes to the fact that I've been able to just enjoy the book and enjoy the process. So yeah, I'm feeling very good. I'm feeling very chill, very calm, and very just like happy to share my book with the world. And my hopes for the future for this book is really just one thing. I really hope the book finds its readers. And that's really it. I feel like, before, like with my last second book in contract, which was the conclusion to the Blood-like duology, which is Blood-like Fate, I feel like I didn't get to enjoy the release of that book at all. Very little, because I was very like bogged down in that second book syndrome thing. I knew it wasn't getting as much attention or push or anything like that. And it felt like it was being forgotten. And my way of dealing with feeling like my book was being forgotten was to just be like, on to the next one. And I just heaped all of my hopes and dreams on Delicious Monsters instead. And that did not go well for me. And I spent that whole time thinking that Blood-like Fate was this big failure, only to learn early in the next year that it had earned out basically right away. So it was very much not. And I feel like that really, it really colored my experience. And I feel like this time with Tender Beast, it's that second book in contract feeling. And I don't want to do the Blood-like Fate thing, which I already think is working out very well. I'm getting to enjoy my time with it and enjoy the launch. And I really want to get to give this book its time to be celebrated and to be loved by me and by other people. And I hope it finds its readers. I hope it doesn't get lost in the sauce, but I hope it really finds the people who are excited about it. And I already feel like that is happening, because I feel like, the people that have like commented on stuff or like tagged me and stuff that are excited for the book are so excited, and I appreciate that enthusiasm so much. And yeah, it really means a lot to me. I think, oh my god, sorry, I got a sudden like emotional rush. My time of the month is very soon. Maybe that's TMI, but it's very soon, and so I'm a little bit higher peak emotion than I would be normally. But I really, really do appreciate all of that, and it already makes me feel like before the book is even out, it's gotten a lot of wonderful love from readers, and I really appreciate that, and that makes me feel confident that it is going to find the people who will really enjoy it. And so that's really my only kind of hope for it. Because I'm in my era of letting go of commercial success, and so that's it. And I have no expectations of commercial success, honestly. And again, I'm not going to look, so I will literally never know unless somebody, I guess when I get my royalty statement, I do look at my royalty statements, because I'm like, how much money did I earn? But I'm really, divorcing myself from those expectations. And I already feel that, and I already feel the result of like the amount of joy and happiness I'm able to have for the celebration of my book, without being overly concentrated on something that I cannot control. And that is it for this video. Thank you so much for all of your support of Tender Beasts. Everybody that watches my videos and has commented to talk about the book or how excited they are, or that they pre-ordered or made a library request or what have you. I really do appreciate you. I'm so thankful. And speaking of pre-orders and library requests, though I guess now it's buying because the book is out. So even though the book is out, you can still enter the pre-order library gift campaign all the way until March 2nd. I believe again at like midnight ET. So again, check out that link in the description. You can either buy the book and submit the receipt, or you can submit that library request, which is free to do, and have access to a bunch of swag, really cool swag and that sort of thing, and possible an entry into that prize pack that you could possibly win. So a lot of cool stuff. So don't forget to check that out, because of course I will appreciate all of that. And yeah, that's really it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.